Welcome to Sravasti Abbey. My name is Will, and it has been a wonderful opportunity over the years to be a sawyer and to join other sawyers and forest professionals and forest ecologists work on Sravasti Abbey's forest management plan. And we currently manage about 300 acres here. And the forest is mainly, it's a rolling terrain. There's a lot of variety on the place, on the grounds. There are little draws and little valleys where you have a multitude of microclimates and little habitats, and it's a wonderful place to visit. But it is also primarily a Douglas fir habitat and a grand fir habitat. And why Douglas fir? Why did that come about? Well, when the Abbey purchased this property, it had inherited the forest from previous owners. And the previous owners may have had different objectives for the forest. And those objectives revolve around commercial interests there. So it was sort of a narrow tube of understanding, as I like to see. And that is because Douglas fir is a highly prized wood. Structurally, from an engineering standpoint, it is perfect for its strength and durability and lightweightness. So it really works well for conventional framing. So there's a high market value for Douglas fir. But whenever there is a logging event, that creates a whole host of causes and conditions and things that can arise from that. So over the years, the site has been logged. And when commercial logging occurs, it is very mechanized over the years, and that mechanization uses a variety of machines. And one of these machines is called a skidder. I don't know if you've ever seen what a skidder looks like, but it's an enormous machine with great big huge tires, and a man sits in the middle of it. It looks like a tank, and out of the back end of it there's this big winch that comes out, and there's all these cables, and that's what they hook the logs to, and the skidder drags the felled logs to the landing. They get loaded on a truck and taken to the mill. Well, what does that skidder do? Well, the tires go through the forest and tear that cover, that ground cover that's everywhere there. We call that Duff. It's primarily needles, branches, leaves from previous years, and it builds up and builds up over the years, and it provides a protective skin, if you will, over the soil. And it holds water, and it also helps the existing stand of timber. It likes it because it inhibits regeneration. Now you're probably wondering, well, that's probably a bad thing. Well, from the forest perspective, it wants to reach a certain status, a certain position of maturity, and so it limits that generation. Now here comes the skidder, along with the other equipment, to do the logging operation. That tears up that duff and exposes the mineralized earth. And so the following year, the Douglas fir trees cone, all of those seeds are dropped, and in every one of those ruts and any of those disturbances, you get regeneration, which is wonderful, right? It shows the rebirth of the forest. But every action has a consequence, and that consequence is now you have an even age stand of little timber, right? They're all the same age, and they're competing for the same limited resources. And what are those resources in a forest? It's water, sunlight, nutrient. So if that's a fixed resource, then all these demands for that present a problem. And as those trees grow and mature and become more and more crowded, some of them die, and they die and they get hung up in the stand in the canopy. And then other pathogens come along and exploit that opportunity as well. You'll have root fungus start to take off in some of those areas, especially some of the damp areas. And it kills off the trees, and then you get this runaway effect. And so what's left is these spindly little trees. So you will see trees about this diameter in the woods here that are 40 to 50 years old. Whereas a healthy Douglas fir tree that's 40 or 50 years should be about this. They should be much bigger. So it presents a problem for us here at the Abbey, because over the years this has gone on, and so what are we left with? We're left with an increasing monoculture. Okay, we have mainly Douglas fir here, but we also have other species like western larch, western cedar, Lodgepole pine, ponderosa pine, and lodgepole pine. I'm going to talk more about that. I have a prop here. And white pine, and these variety of coniferous trees are present, but they're kind of out of balance because the Doug fir is taken off. And ironically, the more you harvest something that you choose from, that creates the more of the coning effect, more of the seed generation. And so by our commercial activities, we are making a monoculture, which we know from a biological standpoint is not a good thing. So that's what we're working with this. We do have deciduous trees here too. We have bush maples, alders, cottonwood, and these comprise the middle story, and ninebark, snowberry, and other bushes that are on the ground floor. So you have a wonderful forest, but that problem of the overcrowding of the Doug fir is present. So the forest management plan, you're probably wondering, well, what are you doing about it? What do we do here? Well, what we do two things what we're working for. The two objectives are to restore some of the species diversity that we have here, and you'll see that some of the venerables have gone through the woods and have marked certain trees to not disturb. Those are usually one of those minority species like cedar, lodgepole pine, and the like. So that's the one objective. The other objective is a little more serious, and that is the removal of the excess biofuels that are present in our forest. And you all know the reason for that, as evidence of what's going on in California right now. We have horrific fire. We have a potential for a fire here. So we want to mitigate that risk by getting that out. And it serves a variety of purposes. When we cut down all of these trees, they don't go to waste. They're cut into firewood. We use them here. Also, we use them for outreach for the community. We have economic problems here in Pend Oreille County, a lot of adversity economically, a lot of poverty. And folks can come up, load up their truck with the wood, give a donation, what they can afford, and that helps solve another problem. So it's a way that the Abbey is not just a good steward of the 300 acres that it manages, but it's also a good steward and a resource for the community. So that's the forest management plan in a nutshell and what we're doing. I'm sure there's some other things there, but I also want to talk a little bit about the fact that the forest is a great teacher. And this last July was Henry David Thoreau's 200th birthday. And I'm sure you remember Henry David Thoreau. Okay, he felt that he could learn from the forest. I want to go to the forest to learn, he said. And I learn a lot from the forest, and it certainly helps me to grasp these concepts of impermanence and emptiness. Specifically, when we look at something like the forest, we think of all of these objects that are there, but we don't really appreciate the fact that there are all of these causes, myriads of causes and conditions that cause those things to be there. So I'll get to my lodgepole pine. This is a lodgepole pine branch, and this species is what they call a pioneer species. And it has a cone here, starting a cone here. And the biology of this tree is very interesting. They live about 100, 150 years, which corresponds to the periodic cycle of fire in our neighborhood up here in the Pacific Northwest. And this tree's cones require fire to open the cone. So being the kind of literary geek that I am, I'm going, there's got to be a metaphor in here, right? Okay. And what is that metaphor? Is that in the grand scheme of things, all living things encounter adversity and challenges and change, right? And those changes can be very painful. And the fire could kill this tree, right? It could kill the parent. But it offers an opportunity for other things to sprout and grow from it. I'm sure you all have had those types of experiences in your past, adversity in your past. My wife and I are going through the change of children moving out and up and away. She seems to be suffering more from this than myself, for some reason, because I'm the dad, I guess. But those things happen, and we just, from those, new things happen. You know, young people move up, they grow up, they go, they develop their own lives, and from that, new things sprout and grow. So I see a lot of stories, a lot of metaphors and things that you can learn from the forest, and this is one example of that. So to wrap up here, I want to go back to Thoreau, and I want you to think about this a little bit. This is what he says. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn from what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had never lived. So we're going to go out in the woods this afternoon, ring the bell. The school is in session. Thank you.